A long time ago, in this galaxy, right here, when I was not yet a sci-fi writer, but simply a sci-fi consumer, I read a book called Brave New World, in which Aldous Huxley showed us a world where people would voluntarily exchange their freedoms for having all their needs and desires met by a benevolent nanny state, which served as inspiration and a contrast to George Orwell's 1984, in which people had their freedoms taken away from them by a tyrannical government. Which scenario should we be more worried about? Which scenario more reflects our present day? I think it's a little of both. Which brings me to the recent controversy of the tabletop RPG Warhammer 40k. A lot of people on social media have been weighing in on this, so let's address some of it. Here's a clip from the Yellow Flash.
They don't do that because those soldiers probably wouldn't sell as well. That's usually the thing. That's one of the reasons why they gender and race swap characters in other franchises, because if they create new ones, they're so bad at it that usually there would be no interest. So what do? Well, they got to take a character that you love and they've got to twist it so that they can get it to sell that way through an established fan base, when really all they do is piss off the existing fans.
I don't quite agree. Let's see what the Critical Drinker has to say.
The problem is that Warhammer started to get popular, really popular, and so it was only a matter of time before it attracted the attention of modern audiences. Not tabletop gamers playing today, of course, or even just women who happen to enjoy the hobby, but instead activists who totally don't give a shit about anything to do with 40k, but just want to score another little victory in the endless war to dominate every single aspect of entertainment and culture. The push to make the world of 40k more diverse and inclusive has been going on for a while now, and one of the big objectives they've been gunning for is female space marines. Because truly, what woman doesn't want to see herself represented as a psychopathic 8-foot-tall genetically engineered killing machine? You know, I can't help thinking that you guys are trying to do a bit of rewriting of history here. I can't help thinking that you've finally started to bow to pressure from modern audiences, and you were almost certainly encouraged to do this by a sudden infusion of investment money from Blackrock.
Now we're on to something.
So there's tremendous growth from the 80s. You said from 87 all the way up until now in 2020 or so, it pops off. It becomes a little more mainstream, I'd say. You said
enormously. Like,
right.
Partially COVID. COVID was huge because it meant that people had a lot of time inside to do things like painting and collecting and wargaming.
Mm-hmm.
And also there is a suspicion because a couple of companies you might have heard of, Blackrock and Vanguard, now own 8% of Games Workshop's stock.
When did
and
that
it wouldn't
happen?
surprise me if that happened around the same time as it took off.
So almost 10% of the company, which
it doesn't sound like a lot, but bear in mind these are companies that control trillions of dollars combined. Like if you're a company and they come to you and tell you to do something, you probably just do it. A pretty hefty jump there that begins in 2015 and then explodes in 2020.
So what happened here? What happened between, I guess, 2021, September 2021, and October 2022? Why was there this giant dip?
Like they were beginning to scratch on the doors of the mainstream, that they saw the little growth, and then COVID saw an enormous boost. And then, of course, eventually the COVID sales began to fall off, the investors started to back off a little bit, and then we have another enormous boost. So Blackrock Vanguard probably came in either in 2022 or in 2020, depending on how visionary they were being.
All of this makes me wonder, is the saying, go woke, go broke, true in all cases? I think not. Hear me out. Imagine you weren't popular in high school. You probably don't have to imagine if you're watching a video about Warhammer 40k. You were probably drawn to these things because you were a social outcast, and then you found community doing things like Warhammer and other tabletop games. Like everyone else, you probably follow the beliefs and social mores of your time. That means if you're Gen X or Millennial, then you probably have a strong belief in individuality. But if you were a social outcast in today's world, then you were probably more vulnerable to identitarian ideologies based around race or gender ideology. Huge corporations like Blackrock know this. It's their job to buy and sell stocks, and they know they have a lot of influence over other companies. Sure, they'll upset some fans, and some will stop buying their products, but a lot won't, and they may gain a lot of fans in the process.
We're fast forwarding now. We're in 2024, and this is, you said, this started in 1983.
Yep.
Developed a very hardcore audience over the last 40 years that is built all around community, literally going to places and physical locations, very unique, and getting together with friends, meeting new friends, competing against each other, playing against each other. The pushback that I see now is that they have now there's female characters for the first time with this.
Well, there have always been female characters, actually. That's the thing. 40K has never been particularly exclusionary, other than it costs an arm and a leg to play the game. Games Workshop has never bought anyone from their shops, so long as you're willing to sell a kidney to pay them for their plastic crack. We've even had armies of all-female characters before, the Sisters of Battle and the Sisters of Silence as well.
What's most alarming about this change is that Games Workshop has gone full 1984 into gaslighting people into believing that there were always female custodies.
That's the difference, is that the custodies throughout their entire history have been male, and now they're saying there are females, and there's always been females. Is that accurate?
Correct, and I think that's the thing that's really important to point out as well, the fact that they claim that they've always been around now. Because if they were simply retconning it, all settings have retcons, all settings have changed in lore on occasion, stuff like that. So if they simply came out and said, okay, we're changing this because, Blackrock owns us at this point, all right, fair enough. But no, instead they say, it's always been this way.
So why continue this push if there was already diversity? It's because for some, pushing is the point.
This is all part of the same movement, because this is all a political agenda coming in here. Vanguard, Blackrock, they have a political agenda, which we know as ESG and DEI.
In other words, top-down ideas originated and promoted by global elites who openly push for a global government.
But to really understand this, we've got to go back to 1930s Europe,
which is the political landscape that academics have trained us to live in anyway.
With a man by the name of Antonio Gramsci. Antonio Gramsci was an Italian socialist who was defeated by Mussolini, the other flavor of socialism in Italy, and imprisoned for the rest of his life. Gramsci was an absolute and utter genius of political philosophy. He was beyond clever, and he is the reason why this is happening to us today, because of the political doctrine that he created. The various socialist theories and thinkers of the time were like, okay, the world is unjust, the peasants will recognize this, and the proletariat will rise up against the monarchies, against the capitalists, and they will create a more equal state, the communist state, the socialist state. But then years passed, and years passed, and years passed, and decades passed, and the peasants refused to rise up. And Mussolini decided to solve this problem by launching his own violent revolution. Gramsci, on the other hand, thought to himself, okay, the peasants aren't revolting because capitalism and democracies have built the world around them. They have built the prison where people live in normality and think, okay, this is just how the world works now. Why should I fight against it? Capitalism is normal, democracy is normal. There's no point in resisting, especially as I'm pretty happy. I'm fat, I have a roof over my head, life's good. Why would I risk all of this by picking up a gun? And so Gramsci thought that the revolution was impossible unless all of those structures of normalcy, all of the institutions around you, all of the ideas and thoughts of modern democracy needed to be replaced by socialist ideals. Only then, once the world had already been culturally captured, could the revolution commence. This was a very long-term plan, because this idea of cultural capture began then and has been going on all the way up until now. Where the idea is you don't capture the institutions directly. You don't march up to the Capitol building and go, socialism, please! you go into a hobby and you go, wouldn't it be nice if this was more equitable and diverse, both socialist political points? And then you browbeat them. You go like, it's very racist what you're doing here. Shouldn't we fix this? And since our world of normality, racism is bad, we go, okay, sure, we've got some black people in here, we'll put in some more. And they go, okay, that's nice, but you're not speaking to the systemic systems of racism you've got here. Like, okay, how do we fix it? And then you bring them into the structures. Now they begin to change the values of society. Then go in and say, it's not enough is the political ideology, because then you get in, you get authority, you get power, and then you begin instituting further reforms until eventually you arrive at the position that Star Wars arrived at a few years ago, where the past must die, kill it if you have to, because now you're replacing what came before. This is the same reason why we're tearing down statues, for example, because we cannot acknowledge the past, because the past is of the old system, and we are trying to replace that system. We are trying to eradicate it entirely. I can bring up like a simpler example of this, right? You know the original Pride flag, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
Pride began as a movement with genuine complaints. Okay, like, we are being harassed, we want to have the same rights as everybody else. Okay, entirely fair enough. And it had a pride flag that remained unchanged for about 30 years, because most of their political grievances were simply just treat us like everybody else. Nothing wrong with that. Then, in 2017, Philadelphia commissioned their own pride flag. That's the one with the black and the brown stripes on top. Now, what does race have to do with pride?
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
Like, the entire point of pride was that it was universally humanist. You can be gay and black or brown or yellow or white. It doesn't really matter. So now they added race into it. That was weird. And immediately thereafter, just a couple of years, the trans pride flag was invented. And then a year after that, the trans and intersex pride flag was invented. And just a couple of weeks ago, London created their own pride flag with 2 pyramids now eating into the pride colors. This is a beautiful illustration of what happens as the ideology grows more and more political, because you're ever pushing forwards toward a more socialist future, a more equity, more diversity, etc., until eventually the original pride colors, they're now half of the flag.
That's so stupid.
Wow.
Yes, it is, but it's a brilliant representation of what happens. Pride starts out as non-political, insofar as we just want the same rights. Nothing wrong with it. Then we add a little bit, then we add a little bit, then we add a little bit, and eventually, the pride part of the flag is just going to be a little roundel up in the corner somewhere.
While it may be easier to dismiss all these things as unrelated, they're not.
Back in the day, when this first started happening in 2014 odd, and the first resistance began against it, Gamergate 1. So back then, none of us had any idea what was happening. I still to this day vividly remember watching a Sargon video where he said, if only I could talk to Anita Sarkeesian, I could explain to her that video games aren't sexist. Which is ridiculous, because Anita Sarkeesian doesn't care about sexist video games. Anita Sarkeesian cares about getting paid for criticizing sexist video games, because they weren't interested in having a discussion. When they said video games are sexist, that wasn't them going like, hey, guys, I think I've come onto something here. They were saying it because that was the political thing to do. And it took us 4 or 5 years easy to begin unveiling the levels of this and figuring out that cultural Marxism was involved at all. It took forever. And by the time we did, all of our institutions were already taken over. Like, Star Wars was already fully taken over from the inside out. Games Workshop has actively denounced their own setting now several times, saying that it's evil and racist and fascist, etc. They are already so deep inside of these companies that it will be very difficult to get them out.
I think Arch has hit on the crux of the issue here.
The beauty of this political ideology is that it doesn't require centralized leadership.
We currently live in a chaotic time where culture is up for grabs, and there are 2 things you can do about it. You could spread awareness, and you could support independent creators. One way to support independent creators is by checking out websites like Fund My Comic. Then keep an eye out for my upcoming comic book, Call Sign Orion. Thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe.